Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Dr. Mohibullah Wazir, and the topic is the blood supply of the brain. Note one point that the blood supply of the whole brain is from four arteries: two vertebral arteries and two internal carotid arteries. Note, you concentrate, look, this is the common carotid artery which divides into internal and external carotid arteries. The internal carotid artery on both sides, it enters into the skull through the foramina and then runs in this petrous part of the temporal bone and comes out over here, lying in the cavernous sinus, this internal carotid artery, then comes out and passes towards the brain, right and left internal carotid arteries. While the two vertebral arteries, which are the branches of the subclavian artery, you look this, the subclavian artery, and this is the vertebral artery. This vertebral artery ascend upward, passes through the foramina transversalium of the upper six cervical vertebrae and then enters into the skull through this foramen magnum. These are two vertebral arteries that you can see over here. Look, this one right, this one, two vertebral arteries which ascend upward and unite with one another to form the basilar artery there. Okay, in this way, the blood supply of the whole of the brain is from two vertebral and two internal carotid. Internal carotid, a branch of common carotid, and the vertebral arteries, branch of the subclavian artery. Okay, this point. Secondly, note that the gray matter of the brain, whether in the cerebral cortex or deeply lying nuclei, this needs much more blood supply as compared to the white matter. Then this gray matter is also very sensitive to ischemia, and it does not tolerate ischemia more than 4 minutes. If the blood supply to the part of the neuron or the gray matter or cerebral cortex or deeply lying nuclei is being blocked for more than 4 minutes, then irreparable death of the cells or gray matter will occur. Okay. Then note the point that the arteries that lies over here on the superior surface or the surfaces of the brain, which are called as superficial arteries, this supplies the gray matter, that is the cerebral cortex. While the deep arteries are also called as perforating arteries, or also give different names: striate arteries, lenticulostriate arteries, anyhow the artery which perforate deeply to supply the deeply lying nuclei. For example, you can see the basal ganglion, the thalamus, and the internal capsule, etc. While these vessels, look, these vessels, if they pass, when they pass through the pia mater, it takes a fold of pia mater along with it, like this. This is the artery, it is the fold of pia mater. When any artery originates into the brain tissue, perforating a deeply lying arteries, this take a fold of pia mater. Is it clear from close? which contains the CSF over here. This is being called as Parry vascular space. Okay. And then these arteries, whether superficial or whether deep, these supplies the nearby white matter as well. Then another point is that the blood contains, the circulating blood contains many toxins. The brain is being protected from these toxins by an anatomical barrier which is being called as blood-brain barrier. Blood-brain barrier. This blood-brain barrier is being made by the tight junction of the endothelium of the capillaries of the brain. No fenestration, that is no space between these endothelial cells, and then the thick basal lamina, and then the footstep of the astrocytes. These combinedly make one barrier which is being called as blood-brain barrier. And this blood-brain barrier is unique by the fact that it does not allow all the material present in the circulating blood, but it selectively allows some structures. That's why it protects the brain from the toxic material being or toxins being present in the circulating blood. For example, you say the bilirubin. The bilirubin which is present in the blood. Now in newborn, the blood-brain barrier is not developed. That's why these bilirubin particles in the circulating blood, it enters into the brain tissue and damage it, and resulting into a condition which is being called as kernicterus, or later on this child, if survives, that will be CP or cerebral palsy child or brain damage child, because the bilirubin particles have damaged the brain tissue. But in adults, when the blood-brain barrier is being developed, this bilirubin then it cannot cross the blood-brain barrier to damage the brain tissue. Then the blood supply of the brain is being divided into two parts, which we call it is the anterior circulation and the posterior circulation. The anterior circulation, this anterior circulation is the arteries which supplies the part of the forebrain up to this parieto-occipital sulcus, except this occipital lobe and part of the temporal lobe. This anterior circulation is being made by number 1, middle cerebral artery, and number 2, anterior cerebral arteries, which are the branches of internal carotid artery. And this posterior part of the brain or cerebrum is along with the brainstem structure, midbrain and brainstem, and this posterior part, the midbrain and brainstem, that is being supplied mostly by the posterior cerebral artery, which is a branch of the vertebral system. So this is the posterior circulation which supplies the posterior part of the forebrain, and then the midbrain, and then the brainstem, while the anterior circulation supplies that area. Okay, then there are some another facts. Look, the arteries which are present on the surface of the brain, these big arteries do anastomose across the sulci and gyri with one another at the arteriolar level. But this anastomosis is also very sparse. But note the point that the deeper arteries, perforating arteries, which passes deep into the brain tissue, into the cortical tissue, these arteries, they do not anastomose with one another at the arteriolar level, but they only anastomose at the capillary level. And this anastomosis is not sufficient to give sufficient supply to the area if any of the artery is being blocked. That's why practically or physiologically, these are end arteries like the arteries of the heart. So the arteries of the nervous tissue are the end arteries physiologically, and that of the heart are being also physiological end arteries, because anastomosis is at the capillary level, not at the arterial level. Okay. Then when the two arteries coming from this side, that is the two tubular arteries, and two arteries coming over here, the internal carotid arteries. These four arteries anastomose with one another. You can see it over here. These four arteries, you look over here, look, this is the two vertebral arteries, this is the basal artery, and this you can see, this is the posterior cerebral artery, this internal carotid artery, and these are the branches, anterior cerebral, posterior communicating, this was study, but these make a circular arteriolar anastomosis over here at this area, at the area of the optic chiasma, at this area, the two internal carotid and two vertebral artery, it make a circular arteriosis, arterial anastomosis over here, which is called as circulus arteriosus, or polygon of artery, or polygon of arteries. This arteriosis between the two vertebral system and two internal carotid artery, this helps in equalization of the pressure in the arteries on the two sides, and secondly, if any of the one artery is being blocked, it may provide a collateral circulation for the other big artery. But when it goes deep, the branches do not have any pre-capillary anastomosis. Okay, this is the general description of the blood supply of the nervous tissue. Now we will discuss the blood supply of the individual parts of the brain in the next lecture. Thank you.